Have you ever wondered why cars from such different brands, across wildly different segments, end up sharing parts, technologies, even owners? A Peugeot, a Dodge, a Jeep, a Fiat, even a luxurious Maserati. All of them, in one way or another, lead to the same place, or rather, to the same name: Agnelli. From founding banks to controlling the media, from global insurance firms to legendary football clubs, the Agnelli family has been a cornerstone in the construction of modern Italy. But their power extends far beyond business. Quietly, over more than a century, they've cast their influence over ministers, generals, dictators, even popes. In true Italian fashion, they stand as a discrete symbol of industrial capitalism. Today, their holding company, Exor, holds stakes in giants like Stellantis, Ferrari, Juventus Football Club, The Economist, and investment funds reaching into everything from biotechnology to artificial intelligence. So, how powerful must a family be to become the structural backbone of an entire nation? This is the story of the Agnellis, and how, in just 4 generations, they rose to become one of the most influential and powerful dynasties in Europe. At the end of the 19th century, Italy was little more than an unfinished idea. A newly unified nation, still fractured by deep regional divides, trapped in subsistence farming, and lagging behind the great industrial powers of Europe. While a fading nobility clung to the past, and peasants struggled to survive, a fledgling bourgeoisie was just beginning to dream of factories, machines, and foreign trade. Who could have imagined that, in such a scattered land, a true industrial empire would take root? The answer came from the heart of Piedmont, with the birth of Giovanni Agnelli Sr. on August 13, 1866, in the small town of Villar Perosa, near Turin. His family, well off and of minor noble lineage, had built their wealth through landholding, rural banking, and early industrial investments tied to the Kingdom of Sardinia. Among their most profitable ventures was the breeding of silkworms, the most coveted raw material for producing fine fabrics in France, Switzerland, and northern Italy. Silk was Piedmont's soft gold, and with it, the Agnelli family began to weave, both literally and symbolically, their path into the industrial age. But Giovanni Agnelli Sr. was not content with inherited comfort. He studied at the military academy of Modena, trained as a cavalry officer, and soon began mingling with the liberal, entrepreneurial circles of Turin. There, amid debates about Italy's modernization, he discovered a fascination with technology and mechanics. That fascination led him to join, as both investor and visionary, a project many at the time saw as nothing more than an engineer's curiosity: the automobile. In 1899, he became one of the founding members of the Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino, better known as Fiat. In its early years, the company produced only a few dozen cars annually, but Giovanni was patient and determined. He foresaw that the internal combustion engine would eventually transform not only transportation, but the economy itself. By 1902, he had taken control of Fiat and began an aggressive expansion, not just producing cars, but also building aircraft engines, trucks, industrial machinery, electric generators, and agricultural tractors. In the years leading up to World War I, Fiat became the most advanced factory in southern Europe, a symbol of Italy's emerging industrial capitalism. And when war broke out in 1914, Giovanni Agnelli aligned Fiat's production with the state's needs. The company began manufacturing military trucks, aircraft engines, artillery, and logistical equipment for the front. Although Italy's entry into the Allied side came late, the war it waged was long, bloody, and mismanaged. It suffered disasters like the defeat at Caporetto in 1917, and only in the final stretch achieved a decisive victory at Vittorio Veneto, which helped bring down the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But the post-war years brought no prosperity. Italy was devastated, economically broken, politically fractured, and socially disillusioned. The country didn't receive all the territories it had been promised, and frustration became fertile ground for fascism. Meanwhile, Fiat had earned millions. Its expansion was unstoppable. For Italy, the war had been an open wound. For Fiat, it was an unrepeatable opportunity. By the end of the war, in 1918, Giovanni Agnelli was no longer just an entrepreneur. He was the most powerful industrialist in Italy, with influence spanning government, banking, and public opinion. And it had all started with a handful of silkworms. Italy entered the 1920s with a broken soul. Though it had technically emerged among the victors of World War I, the country felt defeated. Hyperinflation, mass unemployment, labor strikes, and a government incapable of restoring order or fostering growth. In that political and emotional vacuum, one man rose to channel the nation's rage: Benito Mussolini. As crowds cried out for order and greatness, Giovanni Agnelli realized that power no longer resided merely in production, but in surviving political upheaval. His pragmatism was absolute. If Fiat was to endure, it had to adapt and, if necessary, accommodate. He was no ideological fascist, but neither was he a firm opponent. On the contrary, Agnelli collaborated with the regime from a position of strategic convenience. In 1923, he was appointed senator for life by the Kingdom of Italy, thanks to his ties to the monarchy and his rising economic influence. That same year, his son and heir, Edoardo Agnelli II, made a decision that may have seemed minor at the time, but would prove symbolically monumental and enduring. He acquired the Juventus Football Club. Until then, Juventus had been a modest university team, but under the control of the influential family, it was transformed into a modern, competitive sports powerhouse, deeply identified with the city of Turin and inseparable from the Agnelli name. This was no act of simple patronage. Each Sunday, when Juventus took the field, executives and factory workers shared the same passion. Tying the club to Fiat was a strategy of social integration, a way to channel loyalty, build collective pride, and project an image of class harmony. That same pragmatism led the Agnelli family to expand their influence into the media. In 1926, they took control of La Stampa, the most influential newspaper in Piedmont. From that platform, Giovanni Agnelli mastered the art of calibrated messaging, never overtly fascist, but always aligned with the ideals of order, development, and authority. Throughout the 1930s, Fiat became the largest industrial complex in the Mediterranean. It manufactured cars, trucks, naval engines, and heavy machinery. Mussolini's push for economic autarky favored local conglomerates, and Fiat thrived on lucrative state contracts. But such collaboration came at a moral cost. Fiat also became a supplier of fascist war machinery, producing light tanks and military vehicles for colonial campaigns in Libya, Ethiopia, and the Balkans. Unlike other Axis-aligned companies, however, Fiat avoided direct collaboration with Nazi Germany. It supplied tanks and planes to the Italian military, but not to the Germans. When Italy officially entered World War II in 1940, Mussolini's disastrous military strategies quickly became apparent. Multiple fronts, outdated technology from the Great War era, and troops fueled more by patriotism than by strategy. As the Italian army faced defeat after defeat, the country's industrial infrastructure became a prime target for Allied bombing. Fiat was hit hard. Its Lingotto and Mirafiori factories were bombed repeatedly between 1942 and 1944. Civilian production came to a near standstill. Supply chains collapsed, and Turin fell into one of its darkest chapters. Amid the chaos, Giovanni Agnelli handed operational control to Vittorio Valletta, his trusted associate, who discreetly began establishing contacts with Allied-aligned sectors. Although Agnelli had maintained a relationship of convenience with the fascist state, his personal loyalty to Mussolini remained ambiguous. After the regime's collapse in 1943, and under growing pressure from partisan movements, post-war authorities launched investigations into corporate collaboration during the fascist era. Giovanni Agnelli was temporarily removed from Fiat's leadership while his record was reviewed, though no formal arrest or charges were ever brought against him. Some later testimonies claimed that, in the regime's final years, Agnelli may have discreetly supported elements of the anti-fascist resistance, but such claims were never substantiated. What is certain is that his health was already in decline. In December 1945, Giovanni Agnelli passed away from a heart attack at the age of 79, leaving behind a controversial figure defined by political pragmatism and a keen ability to navigate and survive the unpredictable tides of power. Italy emerged from World War II as a shattered nation. Its cities were rubble, its economy collapsed, and its social fabric torn apart. Fiat, once the engine of Italian industry, had also been wounded. But where most saw ruins, the Agnelli family saw opportunity. In the post-war years, operational leadership of Fiat fell to Vittorio Valletta, the trusted technocrat of Giovanni Agnelli. He was the one who convinced the new democratic governments, and especially the Americans, that Fiat must become the backbone of Italy's reconstruction. Valletta modernized production lines, introduced streamlined practices, negotiated with unions, and restructured the company to face a new world. But reconstruction wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, a new Agnelli would have to rise. And that heir already had a face and a name: Giovanni Agnelli II, known forever as Gianni. Born in 1921, educated between Europe and the United States, with a law degree from the University of Turin and internships at Yale, Gianni embodied the perfect blend of Italian aristocracy and the new global elite. Tall, charismatic, and impeccably elegant, he was more than a businessman. He became a cultural icon. He moved with equal ease through the factories of Turin and the salons of Paris or New York. His ability to connect with key figures in politics, industry, and the arts made him famous. His nickname, L'Avvocato, the lawyer, wasn't due to his legal training, but to his talent for negotiation, diplomacy, and building power. Among his most notable alliances was a friendship with Enzo Ferrari, based on mutual respect and selective collaboration. As the United States pushed the Marshall Plan, Fiat rose from the ashes to lead what came to be known as the Italian economic miracle. The company didn't just resume car production. It expanded into trucks, agricultural machinery, aircraft engines, electric trains, and more. It was a reinvention modeled after General Motors, but with an Italian soul. In 1955, Fiat launched the Fiat 600, an affordable compact car that became the first vehicle owned by millions of Italian families. 2 years later came the legendary Fiat 500, even smaller and even more symbolic. It motorized an entire nation. It was, without exaggeration, the Italian Volkswagen Beetle, a budget vehicle that represented mobility, progress, and hope. Italy was changing. Peasants became factory workers. Cities expanded. A new middle class was born. And at the center of this transformation, Fiat was the silent architect of the future. Giovanni Agnelli, as shrewd as his grandfather, understood that sovereignty was not secured by engines alone. Beyond controlling La Stampa newspaper and Juventus Football Club, he led the family's expansion with investments in Mediobanca and stakes in the holding company EFIL. He was never an elected politician, yet his voice carried more weight than that of many ministers. He maintained close alliances with the Christian Democrats, the dominant party in post-war Italy. His discreet but firm leadership made the company and the nation walk, as if they were one and the same. During the 1960s and 70s, Fiat became a multinational empire. It acquired a 50% strategic stake in Ferrari, without ever absorbing it fully, out of mutual respect with Enzo Ferrari. It revived Maserati as a luxury brand. It founded Iveco, a heavy truck division. It exported entire factories to developing nations, even to the Soviet Union. Inspired by Alfred Sloan's model at General Motors, L'Avocado applied a disruptive diversification strategy: a cheap Fiat for the working class, a Lancia for the rising middle class, a Maserati for the elite. He turned mobility into a symbol of status, the automobile as an extension of the self. At its peak, Fiat employed more than 250,000 people in Italy alone, generated nearly 4% of the national GDP, and was the largest private employer in Western Europe. Gianni Agnelli was welcomed like a head of state in Paris, Moscow, and Washington. But public prestige didn't shield him from tragedy. In 1935, when Gianni was only 14 years old, his father Edoardo Agnelli II, the man who had once led the purchase of Juventus, died in a seaplane accident. He had been the heir to the family empire after Giovanni Sr. His sudden death left a void in succession and a heavy burden on young Gianni. That blow shaped his character. From then on, he knew legacy wasn't a choice, it was destiny. That dynastic pressure would accompany him for decades, and the weight of the Agnelli name would grow even heavier as Italy entered one of its darkest chapters, the years of lead. By the early 1970s, Fiat stood as the towering symbol of Italy's industrial might. Yet, this emblem of progress soon found itself at the center of growing social unrest. The so-called Italian economic miracle had reshaped the country, but it had also sowed the seeds of inequality and tension. The working class, once the backbone of post-war reconstruction, now demanded better conditions, fair wages, and a greater voice in corporate decisions. Fiat's factories, especially the Mirafiori complex in Turin, became battlegrounds for labor strife. Prolonged strikes, sabotage, and production blockades became the norm. The assembly lines, once icons of modernity, turned into trenches of worker resistance. It was in this volatile context that the Red Brigades emerged, an armed far-left group that saw Fiat as a symbol of oppressive capitalism. They carried out numerous violent acts, including kidnappings and assassinations. Their most notorious crime came in 1978 with the kidnapping and murder of former Prime Minister Aldo Moro. Gianni Agnelli, once celebrated as the architect of Italy's post-war miracle, began to be viewed by some as a figurehead of oligarchic power. Despite his charm, diplomacy, and cultural prestige, he now faced unprecedented challenges. Fiat tried to adapt. It automated part of its production. It outsourced operations. It expanded abroad, targeting Latin America, Eastern Europe, and North Africa. But in doing so, it also lost agility. Decisions slowed. Internal bureaucracy ballooned. Political alliances faded. From abroad came another threat: Japan. Brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan were offering cars that were cheaper, more reliable, and better suited to the global consumer. Fiat, with its heavy structures, outdated models, and rigid processes, started to lose ground. The old machine that had once powered the Italian miracle now looked like it was rusting before the world's eyes. To make matters worse, political corruption and cronyism eroded hopes of real modernization. Many government contracts were awarded not on merit, but on favors. Fiat depended on the state to survive, and the Italian state depended on Fiat not to collapse. It was a toxic interdependence, a strategic paralysis. Amid the storm, Giovanni Agnelli used his diplomatic reach and media influence to keep both his own image and Fiat's afloat. But he was no longer the confident architect of Italy's rebirth. He was a weary strategist, fully aware that the grandeur of the past was slipping through his fingers. Then came the final blow. In November 2000, Edoardo Agnelli, Gianni's son and direct heir, was found dead beneath a viaduct. He was only 46 years old. The official story suggested suicide, but for the family the loss was devastating and deeply symbolic. It marked the end of a clear dynastic succession. Within the family, internal divisions further complicated strategic decisions. Gianni Agnelli remained a powerful figure until his death in 2003, but Fiat was already facing enormous challenges in a rapidly globalizing, fiercely competitive world. When Gianni Agnelli passed away in 2003, Italy lost more than just a legendary industrialist. It lost its last great patriarch. His funeral was a state event, but also a symbolic closure to an era, the age of elegant, paternalistic family capitalism that had shaped 20th century Italy. The Agnelli family, weakened and without a direct heir, stood at a crossroads. Fiat, drowning in debt and on the verge of collapse, faced disintegration. The fall of Fiat wouldn't merely trigger an economic crisis. It would feel like amputating Italy's industrial soul. In a last resort move, the family placed its hopes in new blood. John Elkann, Gianni's grandson through his daughter, educated in Paris, trained as an engineer at the Polytechnic University of Turin, discreet, cerebral, and financially wired. And Sergio Marchionne, an Italo-Canadian outsider with neither the name nor the legacy, but a surgeon's mindset. Elkann inherited an empire, in flames. Together with Marchionne, he launched a radical operation: workforce reductions, factory closures, union renegotiations, and finally, the decisive move: the bold acquisition of historic Chrysler in the United States. Amid the 2008 global financial crisis, when the American auto industry was crumbling, Fiat did the unthinkable. It rescued Detroit. The merger gave birth to FCA, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. For the first time in its history, Fiat was no longer an exclusively Italian company. Marchionne relocated the tax headquarters to London, the stock listing to New York, and the operational base to the United States. The cost was high. The national soul was sacrificed to save the financial body. But there was still one more move to make. In 2021, under Elkann's vision and Marchand's legacy, he passed away in 2018, Fiat merged with France's PSA Group. Thus was born Stellantis, the fourth largest car maker in the world. This new giant encompasses brands like Jeep, Ram, Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Peugeot, Opel, and DS, a global portfolio. No sentimentality. Elkann oversaw the transformation with low profile, far from the charismatic persona of his grandfather. He didn't need flair, he needed results. Meanwhile, the Agnelli family holding, Exor, began redrawing its power map. From its base in Amsterdam, it restructured the Agnelli legacy: less industry, more strategic investment. In 2015, Exor acquired a majority stake in The Economist Group, publisher of the influential British weekly. Why would a car maker buy a global media outlet? The answer was simple: influence. In a world ruled by narrative, owning a respected global voice is as strategic as building engines. Today, Exor doesn't build engines, it builds portfolios. The Agnelli family is no longer a clan of industrialists, it's a financial titan. John Elkann represents a new dynasty: global, silent, not romantic, but surgical. The age of heroic entrepreneurs has given way to the age of invisible shareholders. The Agnelli name remains, but it's no longer a national banner. It's an access code, a silent player. The Fiat of strikes, of partisans, of Mussolini's tractors and the people's cars no longer exists. In its place stands a global mechanism called Stellantis. Like every truly successful empire, the Agnelli legacy has learned to change shape, to keep ruling. And what do you think about the Agnelli family's story? Do you know other families who, like them, have shaped a nation's destiny from the shadows? Don't forget to leave us a comment. If this story intrigued you, you may want to discover how an industrial giant named General Motors became a controversial, yet essential piece of America's economic rise. I'll see you in the next one.